Today we're unpacking the real stories behind 6 of the most feared gunfighters to ever walk a frontier street. We'll look at how each man trained, what they carried on their hip, and the split-second decisions that made the difference between walking away or being carried off. Number 6. Clay Allison. Robert Clay Allison came out of Tennessee's hill country hard as cured hickory, carried Confederate gray through New Mexico territory, and never truly laid the war down. Ranch work kept his hands busy, whiskey kept his demons quiet, and both fed the reputation that made newspaper editors describe him as a good-natured man when sober, a devil when drunk. Allison's draw borrowed cavalry flair, elbow-high, sweeping arc, but he shortened the stroke to lethal efficiency. He preferred a Colt Navy converted to fire-metallic cartridges and left the hammer resting on an empty chamber, a safety habit rare among his peers. The episode that sealed his place in gunfighter lore unfolded on the Cimarron Cutoff in 1874. Horse thief Chunk Colbert accepted Allison's invitation to supper, each man pretending cordiality knowing the other meant to kill. As they rose from the table, Colbert's barrel snagged the cloth. Allison cleared leather while still seated and put a round through the would-be assassin's heart. The distance, less than 2 feet, made raw draw speed almost irrelevant, yet the fact he fired accurately from that awkward angle speaks to relentless rehearsal. He drilled sitting, kneeling, leaning back against corral rails, preparing for any turbulence saloon life might throw at him. Law officers discovered the same reflex outside a Los Animas saloon in 1875. Ordered to surrender weapons, Allison instead produced them, muzzle first. 4 shots cracked before deputies registered the change in atmosphere. Constable Faber lay dead, another officer wounded. A court dismissed charges as self-defense, partly because civilian testimony emphasized how quickly the scene shifted and how calm Allison remained afterward, sliding the revolver back as though shelving a book. He rarely unbuckled his gun belt, even when bedding down on the open range, telling trail hands that hell never sent advance notice. Yet Allison was more than a trigger. He organized neighbors against rustlers, confronted serial killer Charles Kennedy, and once dragged Kennedy's corpse through Cimarron streets to warn other predators. Those deeds made local newspapers hail him as a frontier regulator, even while Eastern editorials branded him an unrestrained butcher. 2 contradictory portraits, both rooted in the same hair-trigger readiness. Irony polished the legend's last line. In 1887, hauling grain to his ranch, Allison crawled beneath a freight wagon to soothe a spooked horse. The wheel rolled, snapped his neck, and left the era's bloodthirsty fiend dying in a cloud of road dust. Fate, not faster hands, chose the survivor once again. Cowboys who attended the funeral noted that his revolver lay in the coffin, hammer still resting on an empty chamber, proof that relentless preparedness is powerful, but it can never outdraw happenstance. Number 5. Jim Longair Courtright. Timothy Isaiah Courtright, Jim to friends, long hair to enemies, rode out of the Union Army with a Spencer carbine, a taste for order, and hair that fell past his shoulders in the Cheyenne style he admired. He drifted into Texas Ranger work and Wichita law enforcement before Fort Worth's exploding cattle economy offered a richer niche. Private protection for saloon owners who preferred paying him to fending off stray cowboys themselves. Some called it a racket. Courtright called it keeping the peace, and he did it with a pair of Colt Lightnings worn muzzles out so the barrels cleared leather sooner. A set-up frontier reporters dubbed the border shift. Courtright drilled obsessively, planting fence post targets outside town and thumb-cocking the Lightnings on the upstroke until his right thumb grew a permanent callus. He could hit a playing card at 20 paces before the average deputy cleared his holster. Yet, reputation forged in practice still has to meet reality, and reality strutted into Fort Worth on the 8th of February, 1887, wearing a gambler's silk vest. Luke Short, part owner of the White Elephant Saloon, refused Courtright's fee. Tension simmered for weeks until the 2 men stepped onto a moon-dusted sidewalk, 4 feet apart, hands hovering over ivory grips in the era's formal courtesy. Long hair twitched first. Short's .45 roared, The first round sheared Courtright's right thumb clean off, instantly destroying the calloused trigger cock he had spent years building. Courtright tried to switch guns, a half-heartbeat motion he had seldom practiced under live fire, and short drilled him twice in the chest, once in the head. Police measured 3 rounds inside a palm-sized group, proof short fired deliberately, not in panic. In 20 seconds, the most feared man in Fort Worth lay face down among cigar butts. The duel left more than a corpse. It stamped a cautionary moral on every fast-draw manual printed afterward. Mechanical speed, thumb cock timing, holster angle, muzzle clearance is worth nothing if contingency drills are missing. Courtright had rehearsed a flawless frontal draw but never trained his left hand to fire first, nor prepared a plan for catastrophic injury. That microgap swallowed his legendary edge. The town buried him with civic honors, yet bartenders quietly noted that business improved once the Longair tax vanished. Modern trainers still cite the fight as proof that muscle memory must marry adaptability or milliseconds evaporate like smoke. In the final audit, Courtright's legacy is less about extortion than about the unforgiving physics of stress. You will default to practiced motions, and the one scenario you ignore will choose its moment to appear. Number 4. Doc Holliday. John Henry Doc Holliday began life in genteel Georgia parlors, graduated near the top of his Philadelphia dental class, and seemed headed for a quiet career filling cavities until tuberculosis tore into his lungs at 22. Convinced the West's dry air might buy him a few extra seasons, he saddled up and never looked back, exchanging laughing gas drills for the jangling coin of gambling halls from Dallas to Dodge. The constant rasp in his chest shaped every tactical choice he made. He stripped weight everywhere. No heavy cavalry rigs, no ornate Buscadero drop. Instead, he wore a nickel-plated 1877 Colt Thunderer, high on the belt, butt angled forward so the muzzle cleared cloth on a short, surgical pull that spared his laboring lungs wasted motion. The famous 30-second gun storm behind Tombstone's OK Corral on 26 October 1881 showcases the economy that became his trademark. Holliday started with a 10-gauge stagecoach shotgun, sent Tom McClory spinning down Fremont Street, let the empty scattergun fall like dead ballast, and drew the Thunderer in the same heartbeat, rotating into a half-bladed stance so fluidly that witnesses swore he fired the revolver before the shotgun hit the dust. That grace came from private rehearsals, nights alone in rented rooms, counting hammer clicks instead of sheep, drilling until muscle fiber replaced conscious thought. Tuberculosis, far from a weakness, became psychological armor. The gaunt frame, waxy skin, and blood-flecked cough marked a man already half in the grave. Holliday exploited the image with macabre showmanship, pressing a crimson-stained handkerchief to his lips, offering opponents a thin smile that said he cared nothing for the stakes. Wyatt Earp called him the nerviest man with a 6-gun I ever saw, insisting that Doc usually won before leather cleared because healthier men hesitated at the sight of someone who appeared immune to fear. Mechanically, Holliday understood that speed begins long before the hand moves. He studied micro-expressions, the flare of a nostril, the tightening of a jaw, and squeezed on intent rather than motion, stealing the quarter-second many gunfighters squandered. He filed front sights smooth so linen wouldn't snag, trimmed cartridges so primers sat level, and practiced reloading behind his back in case black powder smoke choked visibility. Even his whiskey intake was calculated, just enough rye to steady nerves, never enough to dull them. Despite dime novel exaggerations, Holliday killed fewer men than legend claims because he mastered the greater art of ending fights without firing. In saloons from Dodge to Leadville, he cooled dozens of confrontations by tapping the Thunderer's barrel on a stack of chips and letting that consumptive cough finish the sentence. Poker bought new cylinders, yet dentistry never entirely left him. Between faro deals, he still pulled miners' molars, wrapping instruments in cloth to keep coal dust from jamming the gearwork. When disease finally claimed him in Glenwood Springs in 1887, he studied his bare feet, laughed softly and muttered, "This is funny." Consumption, not a bullet, proved the one adversary faster than his famous hand. Number 3. Billy the Kid. Henry McCarty, alias William Bonney, grew up in adobe alleys where a skinny orphan learned that agility outruns bulk and charm, softens locked doors. During New Mexico's Lincoln County War, he shifted between a Winchester 73 carbine for distance work and a Colt single-action army kept half-cocked in a low-slung Mexican loop, cut so the trigger guard rode just above his kneecap. He rarely practiced in the Hickok sense. Instead, he turned daily ranch chores into reflex drills, swinging into a saddle while snapping hammer to full cock, or hopping a fence while switching from carbine to sidearm in midair. Allies said he could jerk iron, fire, and be 3 steps left before shell casings hit dust, using lateral motion to spoil an enemy's aim. On April 1, 1878, he ambushed Sheriff Brady under morning sun, firing through a picket fence. Brady died gripping his still-holstered Colt, a scene repeated throughout the conflict. The kid's real edge, however, was spatial intuition. He knew every porch creek, every lamp shadow between Lincoln's storehouses and Fort Stanton's brush canyons. That sixth sense guided his legendary courthouse escape. He seized Deputy Bell's revolver while descending stairs, wheeled, fired a fatal shot upward, then sprinted across the second-floor veranda, pausing only to taunt Deputy Ollinger with his own shotgun before pulling both triggers. Contemporary chronographs suggest a single action's half-cock-to-fire sequence takes roughly a quarter second. McCarty's fluid string of actions compressed 2 separate gun grabs and 3 shots into perhaps 5 seconds, all while navigating narrow stairwells. His death at Fort Sumner came like Harden's, from the unseen direction. Pat Garrett stepped from darkness and fired first. Yet newspaper linotypes immortalize the myth of a lightning-fast teenager, and every modern Park Service reenactment keeps one trick from the kid's playbook. Holster loose, hammer half-cocked, mind already racing 3 moves ahead of the next man who blinks. Number 2. John Wesley Harden. Born 1853 to a Methodist preacher on Texas's post-war frontier, Harden absorbed 2 lessons early. Personal slights escalate fast, and speed decides who leaves upright. He claimed his first killing at 15, shooting a freedman named Mage during a wrestling dispute, then fled on horseback for nearly 2 decades of blood-spattered momentum. By his own boast, he slew 42 men. Court records support roughly half that, but surviving affidavits show a pattern of first-shot dominance. Harden favored slightly underpowered cap and ball navies long after metallic cartridges appeared. Lighter recoil let him control muzzle climb while fanning the hammer with his offhand. He often kept 2 pistols cross-draw, grips angled out so the barrels cleared his broadcloth coat in one continuous scoop. Farmhands near Gonzales recalled watching him rehearse this motion at sunrise, snapping empty chambers on a willow switch until sweat soaked his linen collar. The key, he later wrote from prison, was staying loose-kneed, toes pointed, weight balanced, like a man fixing to dance. In Comanche County, he reportedly faced 3 possemen, firing his right-hand piece until empty, then drawing left to finish the last man before the first body hit dust. Evidence of muscle memory so ingrained, it bypassed conscious thought. Years in Huntsville Penitentiary honed a different weapon. Law books. Pardoned in 1894, he reopened life as an attorney but couldn't outrun reflexes. After an argument over a gambling debt, Constable John Selman put a bullet behind Harden's ear as the ex-outlaw rolled dice in El Paso's Acme Saloon. Harden never saw the draw, underscoring the paradox he understood better than anyone. Even the quickest hand is vulnerable to the unnoticed barrel behind it. His diaries, full of mechanical notes on cock height and trigger pull, remain must-read material for modern cowboy action shooters, chasing hundredths of a second. Number 1. Wild Bill Hickok. After the smoke of the Civil War cleared, James Butler Hickok rode the Kansas-Missouri border carrying more reputations than cartridges. Union scout, crack rifleman, riverboat gambler, stage spy, and, thanks to Whitman-style newspaper prose, the West's most unruffled gun hand. The duel with Davis Tutt on July 21, 1865 made him famous. Yet the real takeaway wasn't supernatural speed, but disciplined logistics. Hickok entered the square with his 1851 Navy already capped, half-cocked, and hanging butt forward in an open-topped Mexican loop. The pistol's muzzle pointed behind his off-hip, shaving a crucial inch of travel. Off-duty, he drilled that cross-draw until the web of his thumb hardened like rawhide. In Hayes City, he stretched a rawhide thong between cottonwoods and practiced snap shooting brass buttons at 20 paces, timing the fall of each spent cap by the echo of his own heartbeat, so he could feel, not count the rhythm. When Abilene hired him as marshal, he used geometry rather than bluster. Lamp posts angled to spill light across doorways. Patrol routes plotted so converging lines of fire covered every alley. Witnesses said he seemed to slide sideways as he walked, half-bladed to a threat even while tipping his hat to schoolmarms. Twice cavalry troopers tried to rush him in the Alamo Saloon. Both died because his Colt leapt into position while they were still shrugging off greatcoats. Hickok's fatal flaw came later. He always sat with his back to the wall, but in Deadwood's number 10 saloon, the only empty chair faced the door. Jack McCall shot him through the skull before the lawman's fingers even twitched, proving that vigilance, not velocity, ultimately decides the last man standing. Yet every modern fast-draw champion, from Hollywood stand-ins to IPSC legends, still mimics that half-bladed stance, relaxed wrist, and silent mental countdown. Hickok turned into an art.